happy Thursday. I hope you are keeping warm if you're on the island or Vancouver area, and I guess anywhere in Canada at this point. I hope you're keeping warm. I'm Kayla. I am a psychic medium, for those of you who don't know me and haven't had a reading with me yet. I work out of my home office, but I can also do readings via phone, or there's a Facebook kind of audio video messenger thing that I can also do that too. So after my last big set of videos, I got a lot of really great messages and positive feedback, and just a lot of people really wanting more and more kind of little bits of information, kind of about their spiritual awakening, or just about how to use oracle cards, or what are crystals, how do I use them. And I also get a lot of questions from people during readings, especially when things come up if they don't have maybe an awareness or just education around that specific topic. So I thought it'd be really great. So this is the first segment of Medium Small Talk, because I'm a medium and they're hopefully going to be small videos or short videos. But I think the title was pretty funny, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I will do sometimes live, sometimes it'll be recorded. It'll just kind of depend on my day and when I can get things done, especially when my husband's working away. It kind of can be hard to navigate certain time periods. What was I going to say? I'll also upload these to YouTube as well. I'm going to add my YouTube channel to my Facebook page. But what else is important? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think anything else is important. We'll kind of just get started. For a lot of you who don't know me and have just seen me through video, you'll get to know me as kind of time goes on, and feel free to kind of just message and introduce yourself. I love getting to know people, and it's nice to see who's kind of engaging. But let's kind of get started with today. So as you saw, there was like a big theme of kind of all the topics that people had posted, which was really around like intuition and self-trust. And so, I mean, they're kind of one and the same, but they can be unpacked differently, or they can be unpacked to look a bit different. But I think it's really kind of about the process, I would say, of like how to trust self. Is also kind of like how to kind of lead a life where your intuition kind of leads you and guides you, and then the trust in doing that. And then I think there's another component which I'll talk about next week. So I kind of broke it into two segments. So the first one is going to be around trust to the self, or how to trust self, how to use our intuition to kind of guide us, and what that looks like. And the different barriers that can kind of get in between that. And then next week is going to be about the bigger thing, which really connects a bigger thing, more like on a bigger spectrum around like trusting the world and trusting ourselves, but how we view and see how the world works and how life works, and that whole kind of bigger trust, because they're very interconnected. And so I will talk a little bit on it today, but I kind of broke it down into two, because I don't want these videos to be super long for you. I know life is busy. So I have some notes here, so if you see me looking down, I'm just kind of reflecting and kind of making sure I'm not going off topic. So let's first talk about where do we feel our intuition. Let's go there first. I think there's two kind of main ways in this. I mean, these videos can be very detailed. So these are just kind of the basics. So, I mean, the way we feel intuition is going to be through messages. And so when we think of messages, it's kind of like just this inner knowing. And those gifts look different for everyone. And yes, everybody has their own set of gifts, everybody. Just whether you're awakened to it or you have a connection with it, which we'll kind of talk about that after. But we get a lot of just like inner knowing. Sometimes it pops into our head. Sometimes it's just like a sense of feeling. You know, there's all the different clairs. I won't get into them, but you can Google like clairvoyance, clairaudience. Sometimes we get like sounds like somebody's talking to us, like it could be our voice, could be a different voice, but we get these intuitive knowings. And yeah, I would say they happen in like this field, right? Because that's our crown chakra, which is connected up and open, and that's kind of how we channel and connect with spirit. And then there's our third eye, and that's also like our inner eye, like how we see. So definitely within this area is where we get like messages, okay? So what that could look like is it happens very frequently. It happens all the time. It happens throughout the day for everybody. I think it's just been a part of who we are because we were born with this channel to connect. You know, we didn't come here, like I always say, we came here well equipped for the journey. And one of the things as humans we don't realize is we did have all these cool tools to connect us. And some people just aren't aware of them or how to use them, or just know when they're really coming up, which is every day. So I always say, like, a story would be like my husband who loses everything. He put his wallet on the back of the truck, drove away, blah, blah, blah. I was panicking. I bought the wallet. It was custom made. It was very expensive. And everything he had, which I told him not to put in the wallet, was in the wallet. Social insurance number, everything. And so I just sat for a second, and it was like that moment where my brain could branch out into all the fear of like, oh God, we're gonna have to pay to do this and this and this, and that's lost money and all that. Or I just stopped and I can connect. And that will be other videos. We won't talk about how to do that. I mean, everyone can. It's just that whole idea of listening. We don't do enough of it. Spirit's always usually trying to get our attention. It's just about creating a space that's quiet and it's calm so that we can listen. So in that, I had a quick message, which was like, a guy will bring some of it later. Don't worry. And it was just this knowing. Now, if you don't create that space, those moments can happen and those messages can sound like thoughts, and they can be fast. And they're always firing and it's always happening, but we just don't know how to differentiate them. Like when we're leaving the house and we have that like quick kind of voice that says you forgot your wallet upstairs, or forgot your wallet somewhere, or your phone, whatever. And it's just so fleeting and so quiet and so subtle that we just walk out the door anyways. Then we get to work or go through the drive-through and grab a coffee, and then we realize that we actually don't have our wallet. And we can always trace back and pinpoint that one moment where we're like, shoot, like I knew it. And then we keep promising ourselves, oh, I'll listen next time. And so it's just really about getting to know that voice and creating that space for when it comes up, and slowing our body down and being connected. We'll talk about that in a second. The second way we get messages is definitely through our intuition, through our feeling, through our center. So I always view like neck to like pelvis area. This is like our, well, tummy, I would say, all of basically our abdomen, our whole torso, is our intuition. It's our heart center. It's our connection to self. It's what houses our connection and intuition to feeling. And that to me is about trusting, and trusting when this is working. It's like dropping into it and feeling it. It's like when we're making a decision, when we have maybe multiple job offers, or for a house or anything like that. When something comes up and we have to make a decision as a human, you know, to break up with someone or to not, or to purchase this house or to move or to not, or to take this job or to not, all of these things, it's just so easy. We just end up getting stuck in the neck above, and we try to make decisions through this process, which isn't going to serve us because our brain is really a very fear-based place. And again, I've done lots of videos on it, and it can't see the future, and it doesn't like things that are unpredictable or aren't familiar, and it tries to launch us into these all old patterns and beliefs around fear of like, I can't do it, and all those old messages come up if we haven't really worked through them. And even if we work through them, our brain's always going to be our brain. Our job is just to be the observer and not allow ourselves to get sucked into that whole story. So if you're still following me, so we get messages through here. So when we're about to make that decision, we can drop in. So I always view it as like an anchor. You know when like an anchor drops into the water, it's heavy, you know it's going right down to the bottom of the ocean or wherever you're trying to drop it or place it. I always view it of like, okay, I'm recognizing I'm up here, I'm becoming the observer. My brain is launching into all of these crazy things, let's say about buying a new house or to stay at the house that you're currently at. And so I feel as like an anchor drops me, like I drop my own anchor. So like my true sense of self just drops into my body, and I get really comfortable, and I'm like, okay. And then I close my eyes and I feel into it, and it takes a lot of practice. And you can, okay, we'll stay on task. It takes a lot of practice. I'll tell you some action plans at the end of kind of how to practice. But when you drop into your body, you just feel into your heart center, and you feel into this part, and you have this inner knowing. And the thing is, and this is the hard part, is we don't always like it. So then we justify it. And then it's like we really want to buy a new house. But that's our mind and our brain loving the things, because humans love things that are new, right? We love new. We don't really like the erosion piece or the old or whatever. So we're always like, ooh, new car, new this. Like we love that kind of thing. So all of a sudden we're like, we drop into our body and we feel, and it just doesn't feel like the right time to move. It's like, you know that, but then it's like our brain overrides it, or our human overrides it. So that happens all the time. And so when that is constantly happening, and it's been happening for maybe decades for you, it can get really hard to trust that. So let's move on to that. So those are kind of the two main ways we get messages. So you can call that trusting, or sorry, it is intuition. It's just about whether or not you trust it. So that's the trust piece. Okay, let's talk about barriers. Now this is really important. So how we trust ourselves is fostered from childhood. If we grow up, for example, my daughter, if she came to me all the time and said she feels something, she thinks something, or she's curious about something, or this, and if I was always telling her the answer, like, nope, 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 if I didn't allow her the space to explore and trust her feelings and look at that, I mean, I'm not always the best, trust me, I'm not the best parent, and sometimes drives me, you know, like every kid, and sometimes I don't always want to listen, sometimes I don't really have the patience to explore all of that, but for the most part, do you know what I'm talking about, is when we are children, we see and feel everything in the world and all of that. And if we're not met with that idea of like, oh, okay, you feel that way, whether you're 4 or 10, or, you know, maybe sometimes we have parents who are absentee parents, whether it's their mental health or emotional, or they're, you know, busy working and providing and all these things, or maybe both parents if you're in 2-parent family. There's all these reasons why sometimes parents can't present and be that present for us. And when we don't have that, or our friends or our grandparents or aunties and uncles and all these people aren't stopping and looking at us at all those ages and saying, oh wow, like tell me more about that. When nobody comes from a place of curiosity, how the fuck are we supposed to come from a place of curiosity? How are we supposed to build and like cultivate that sense of trust in ourselves? No one's giving us the tools, no one's teaching us how. No one tells us from the beginning, like, you're well equipped, trust yourself, always trust yourself. What do you feel? Okay, good. And even the human part and the adult part can be like, that's a terrible decision, but it is about them exploring, and it's about them hearing that somebody in an adult position trusts them and encouraging them to trust themselves. The fact is, most of us really don't have that. And so when we don't have that, we don't cultivate trust from such an early age. And that really impacts our connection to self. That's the second piece. And this also starts in childhood. And don't get me wrong, even if like you've had the worst child experience with absentee parents and trauma and all these layers, that doesn't mean you can't come out of it. It doesn't mean just because you weren't fostered, you know, some of these pieces and there are barriers, that just means they're barriers to you doing it now. So it's just kind of going back and identifying like, oh wow, like nobody really ever cared how I felt. So it's kind of like you learn to shut that part off and you don't really trust yourself. And then what happens is you end up traveling, which is the next kind of main barrier I see with people, and barriers I work through myself, or I wouldn't be sharing them, is you start living from the neck up, especially and we live in a world where poverty is really, it really affects the majority of the population, especially in BC. We have the highest rate of poverty in Canada. There's also, you know, domestic violence plays a huge role, any type of grief, loss, trauma in families. Like there's all these kind of things, like, you know, blended families, working parents, or single parents, like all these things shape our families. So no family in the entire world is the same, and nobody comes out unscathed. So it is our responsibility to go back and to really look at those parts of our lives and say, okay, wow. And this is where we get to be the adult to all those parts of us, those childlike parts. And even if you've come from a very beautiful, amazing, compassionate, kind family, still do this work, because that doesn't mean that there were certain areas where our parents couldn't, you know, cultivate that enough, because maybe they didn't know how to do that in themselves. So always really important. Doesn't mean we go and get stuck back in there. It just means we go back and we're curious about it. I'm like, okay, I can totally see how this relates to like how I trust myself in this life. Okay, what can I do about it? Let's like move through that. The second thing is, again, we end up living in a neck above. And that happens when we experience a lot of trauma. It happens when we experience a lot of stress as children and young adults or teenagers. And actually, I would say for the most part, it's the majority of our population, right? We live in this place, we're not really taught at young ages like how important it is to feel into your body. It's only in the last decade or so that they're bringing things like yoga into classrooms and meditation and calmness and how to do visualizations and feel into your body. And where does that come from? That language didn't exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we do have a lot of people, especially adults, walking around the world living from the neck above. It's a safe place, it's comfortable, but there has so much more to their body. And that is where our intuition, our heart center, and our trust, or the way we can trust ourselves, it lies. So that's kind of the next barrier, looking at that. Speaking of trauma, someone asked a really great question, is when can our trauma shape our lens of how we see and view the world? 100%. So again, that is up to us to understand how each of our individual traumas show up and affect and impact our life. I'm trying to think of an example. Okay. It was probably a little dark, but so my dad and my stepmom passed away in an accident when I was 18. And so I've had a lot of issues over the years with driving. Whether I felt safe to drive, whether I wanted to drive, whether I thought I was going to die. Trauma. It shows up in a lot of different ways, and I had a lot of visions, and I've had a lot of things, and it was really my job to unpack and say, okay, especially when I met my husband, because his family lives like 8 hours away, and it's a lot of driving up and through mountains. And I mean, there's some hills in Ontario, but there are no mountain passes, and some of them can be quite dangerous, and there are not a lot of good drivers on the road. And especially those 2-lane kind of mimics my dad's accident, those 2-lane kind of, highways where there's no barrier. And so I used to have the worst visions, the worst anxiety, the worst panic, to the point where I couldn't do it. Not only could I not drive, but I also wasn't comfortable being in the passenger seat because I needed the control of being able to drive. So it was just like, we can't do it. And so that is a good example of our trauma stepping forward. So were my visions in my head always correct? No. Was I going to get in an accident? No. Did it make me hyper aware and alert to the fact that there are some bad drivers on the road and that I just have to be extra cautious? Yes. But it gives me an opportunity to be like, okay, my trauma stepping forward, it's shaping the way I see this driving. It's definitely impacting my life in ways. So what can I do about it? How can I offer some healing to that part of me? And then it's kind of about that self-talk and that compassionate self. It's like, wow, Kayla, like that must have been really hard to feel and to remember and to, have that come up all the time. But wow, but that isn't now, and that's not you. However, in saying that, if I had like a very intense feeling of like, oh, today's not like we shouldn't take this trip or something, that intuition, it would be again dropping back into my body and really feeling. I would be checking in like with my guides basically, which is something that we'll talk about eventually, but really checking in and being like, okay, I can feel into that. Is that old trauma? Is that worry that's happening up here? Like, is that neck above? What's my truth? And when I drop in and I go within, all I hear and I know, and it's this knowing, this feeling, the voice, and it's saying I'm safe. So I'm like, okay. And so I can move through that. Does our trauma shape and it can have a negative impact on our relationship with self? When things are unsafe and things happen, whether it is grief and loss, whether it's abuse or neglect, whether it is, in terms of weather or assault or violence, any of those things, they can impact and definitely challenge our relationship with our body. And it is up to us to do the work. And sometimes that means seeking out extra support and counseling to really help us learn to understand the difference. I will say, if you've had any type of sexual abuse or any type of assault or abuse in general or neglect, especially to the body, you're going to be someone who lives in the neck above. And I'm sure all of you are watching know and understand that. So it is about learning to do some trauma therapy and work through that through counseling, of really kind of developing and cultivating that relationship with our body and kind of allowing ourselves to feel safe. And so that is up to us, and definitely can be a huge barrier to us feeling you know, trusting ourselves and trusting how we feel, because when those things happen, the messages we're getting is all the sensations, the feelings, like I'm not trusting them because it's not safe and I can't, and so it can be really impactful. So I encourage anyone who, if you are feeling like some of your trauma or specific parts of your trauma are really playing a role in impacting how you connect with self, how you connect with the body, and how you feel your discernment and how you feel your intuition, then definitely seek out some support. But if you've done a lot of the work, then you do have that awareness of when old trauma does present itself. And you can do lots of work around really releasing that from your cellular body and releasing that from, you know, your DNA and all of that, that it doesn't serve a purpose anymore. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you become the person you want to be. So you can do stuff when we're letting it go, or you can, it just might come forward in your brain and you just know the difference between what is that your trauma coming forward and then your intuition. And when you learn to practice kind of the dropping down and the creating that space, it becomes easier to differentiate that. It's an added layer if you've experienced trauma, but anyone would have to do the work to learn to understand when the brain is active and learning to observe that. Then the next layer is, yeah, for sure, if you have trauma, working and learning how to heal that and cultivate that relationship with self again around safety, and learning to be like, okay, I trust myself. I know what's best for me. And then again, learning to kind of be able to drop down into that body and have those quiet moments where you can feel and know the difference. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Let's talk about, what does it look like when we aren't trusting? This is important. When you aren't living a life of trusting life, the flow of life, when you haven't spent enough time, which we'll talk about next week, of how you believe, what are your values and beliefs around spirituality and how the world works and how the world shows up for you. When that isn't there, you're going to walk around the world in a very fear-based place. So when you are not living a life from stopping, creating those moments to really trust and make decisions from your higher self, your intuition, and when you're not really learning to listen to those messages that come in, it can create a lot of sadness. It can create a lot of anxiety. It can create a lot of confusion. It can create a lot of anger. It can create that feeling of like being stuck or no direction. And sometimes when we get to that place, we're like, oh, panic and vibrate. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And sometimes people look out for someone like me to kind of give them the answers. But no, empower yourself. You have all the answers. And again, going back to belief and value, you're well equipped for this journey. And so if you believe that your higher self, which resides in your field, and she has lived many, many, many lives, she houses so much wisdom, and you have that connection to higher self and to spirit and all of that. So you have that ability to do that. So we don't need to walk around the world feeling stuck in whatever. Do we get stuck? Yeah. So we stop, we meditate, we go out in nature, we have a bath, we have a shower, we clear our mind, we stop, we listen, and we go within. Is it going to feel comfortable the first time? Fuck no. It's very uncomfortable. And it takes a lot of practice. But the more you do it, the stronger your relationship is with yourself. It's like the first time you met someone at university that's in your class, you're taking class with, or you met a new friend. It's not comfortable the first time. You don't want to like just blurt your whole heart out, you know? You're like, okay, you're like, do I like this person? Do I like them? Do I feel okay with them? Do they make me feel good? Do they make me feel safe? Do I want to see them again? How do I want to see them again? Okay, let's hang out, and then you get to know, and then you eventually start sharing. And it's the same with the relationship with self. And again, when it's not cultivated from an early age, that we have this beautiful relationship with self, and that's actually one of the most important relationships you'll have, we have to do that work as adults. All right, next. Trust is connected again to beliefs in the self and the way the world works. So like example, like for worriers, you would say no, like there's no trust. Sorry, let me just rephrase that. So the people who move around the world worrying all the time, and they're in panic and like, again, confused all the time and worrying and stressed about everything, you have to say something like, no, you have to trust that you'll be guided. Again, values and beliefs. Trust that when something is wrong, because people worry about their health all the time or other people, when there is a moment where you need to jump into action, when there's a moment where you need to do something different, know that you will know at that moment. But worrying from here every second of every day until that moment is useless. It doesn't serve you, and it drains your energy. Okay, we'll talk about more of that stuff next week. I love this saying. It's my favorite saying. I say it all the time. In the absence of trust will always be fear. Always. It takes recalibrating your sometimes brain, sometimes your body, relationship with self, all the things of like how we process from a fear-based lens. So going to like, I never trust myself. I make the worst decisions. I choose the worst type of guys. I'm always, this, and this. If you want to keep saying that, again, law of attraction, what you put out there, you're just going to get back. The universe is very unbiased. They're not like, ooh, that's a positive thought, or that's not. It just is like out there. So again, when we walk around the world feeling negative towards ourselves and our relationship with self and our trust with self, that's all that's going to keep happening. If you can, and it's very fearful. You're telling yourself you're scared of everything. You're scared of men. You're scared of making good decisions about, relationships. You're scared of how you handle money. You're scared of all of these things. It's just fear, 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 fear. I'm scared of not being in control. I'm scared of what if this happens? Oh my God, what if I make the wrong decision? All of it is scarce and it is fear-based. And again, that's the brain. Those old patterns don't exist. And so it's about recalibrating that and switching it to, I trust the flow of life. And I trust that when I need to jump into action, I will. And I trust that if I need to make the move, I will. I'll know. And I just trust. And you sit in that. It has a whole different energy. And it can be challenging for someone to get there, especially if they're very hyper vigilant, like I have been for many decades. It can be really hard to relax into that idea of trusting the flow. Again, bigger picture, bigger trust. We'll talk about that next week. Okay, so last few things. Most of us are already very intuitive and connected, and we all receive messages. Again, it's just that we have been doing it our whole life. Again, crown chakra, open connection. We're all souls having a human experience. So if we've had these things happen our whole life, it's just like having our nose. It's not something we notice every day. Our hands are a part of our life every day. It's not like we are super hyper aware of it. They're just a part of us. So our intuition is just the same. Now, how it could work, like this is just a basic understanding. And again, this kind of goes back to like, that we don't really listen to it because we're not acknowledging it. We're not aware to it. So for example, basic understanding. So first, it will be this intuitive knowing that kind of happens. Maybe you feel it in here, or maybe it's this message of like, don't go out this weekend. Or like this inner knowing of like, don't go to that party. It's just there. But then again, we don't think of it as discernment, and discernment is just a fancy way of intuition and trust. We don't view it as discernment, and as our intuition and our higher self looking out for us, knowing what's best. So then we ignore it. And then the belief and thought that steps forward is, oh, you're being antisocial. You didn't go out last weekend. You never do anything for yourself. Just go out. So that's the brain. It's the thought overriding the intuition. And this happens like a dozen times a day. And then the result is what? You go out, maybe something not so great happens, or you end up really tired and exhausted the next day, and then this, and this doesn't happen. It just kind of has that effect, right? Again, kind of going back to action plan. This is really important. It's not like, intuition is something that you can definitely turn on in a way, but it is a relationship with self, and it does take some time. And one way to do it, and I tell people all the time, is intuitively eating and intuitively making decisions. When you're not doing it from your brain and you're dropping into your body, okay, what should I make for dinner? Maybe your brain's like, bing, I want tacos. But when you drop into your body and you feel into it, immediately, all that dairy or that cheese is just, no, it's good. It doesn't feel good. It just feels heavy. It's like, okay, no, what am I going to have? Okay, I'm going to make like chicken and vegetables. And it's like, it feels good. And that to be true. Again, we override it. Our brain be like, no, I want the tacos, then I want the ice cream, and then I want all of this. And literally, I'm talking from experience. Sums up my life, guys. But no, intuitively eating is really important. Again, it's that way of allowing your inner body, your body, your wisdom, your higher self, your soul, your heart center. It's allowing all these things to take the forefront and really stepping in and having this dialogue with them and bringing them forward. Again, the trauma, again, that not being cultivated in early childhood, this disconnection with the body, all these things. And there's 100 barriers I won't get into, but all of these layers really like stunt that relationship with self. And so it is giving that intuition, it's giving that power, or it's giving power back to that intuition to say, hey, you have a role at this table in my life, and I really want you to join it. I really want you to show up, because I really like what you have to say, and I really want to, and my intention is to live a life from my intuition, so that I can make decisions that are in the best interest of me and my higher self. Does that make sense, guys? I really hope so. So again, intuitively making decisions about people. The biggest thing is we think discernment is judgment. You know, we think that when we meet someone, our first intuition is like, energy drainer, this, and then we're like, but then the thoughts come in and be like, come on, like, give that person a chance, like, you don't really know them. And so we completely disregard our discernment. And this comes from society and stuff too, right? Give people a chance. You don't judge a book by its cover, all of that. But when we're growing up, all of these like sayings and everything are like pushing us to be like further away from ourselves and look out into the world for external validation and all of that. And that we have to be it's like, no, turn that back in. If your body and your intuition and everything is just saying no, then there's no room for them in your life. Doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're being rude, doesn't mean you're judging. It doesn't mean any of those things. It's just you're honoring you, okay? So, do the work. Look at the areas of kind of where this relationship with yourself kind of started. And then I want you to look for ways to kind of inject and heal that in your everyday life. Allow that part of you to step forward. It's really important to kind of learning to trust yourself. And it's probably not going to happen overnight. But if you're watching this video, there's an intention there. And I think the beauty of the way the universe works is when we set an intention, we put it out there, things start to shift and happen. And sometimes that shift and happen looks like upheaval inside of our body, because all that shit that's been sitting in there that's kind of been a barrier to like our true sense of self, our learning to trust ourselves, is there, and it needs to get rid of it. So sometimes that looks like memories or thoughts coming up. So just paying attention to that, and you will start to learn to trust yourself. But the beauty of it, it really comes with having faith. If you get that message and you know you shouldn't go to that party, or if you get that message and you know you shouldn't just go on that date, if you feel that, like really allowing yourself to honor that. Again, going back to it happens all the time. And so now you're learning to slow down and be like, okay, when is my intuition activate? You know, is it around food? Is it around people? Is it around this? Especially if you're a parent, I always say we're always intuitively parenting based on what we know. We always know our kids like 4 steps ahead. We're 4 steps ahead of them, but we never stop and look at that as intuition. You know, we know something's going on at work, or we feel that energy of like, ooh, maybe something's going on with that person. Again, that's our body's way of saying, you know, something's going on, and we're reading energy. All of this on so many levels is happening all the time. It's just slowing yourself down and becoming aware to it, and then consciously choosing to live a life where you trust yourself. And I will say that even when I started doing this, like in a full-time role and doing readings, and it was really hard. I didn't always trust messages that came in, and there's still some things that come in and I'm like, that can't possibly be it. And there's things that I don't even want to say, but I've learned to like be unfiltered and really just trust. It's like you look at your life and you say, when I trust and when I lead from that place, what is the evidence? The evidence is that I'm always right and that it is true. And I can always look back at that moment where I knew. So if that's always the evidence, then learn to trust that. And sometimes that means you're going to have to make choices that you wouldn't have normally made. And sometimes you're going to have to lead from places that you wouldn't normally lead and push yourself outside your comfort zone. But at the end of the day, if you can say, okay, today I really led from my intuition. I really led from this place of like my intuition and my heart center having a really, you know, very important role in kind of my day-to-day choices. And sometimes that means that there's people that might have to leave our life, and sometimes that means we need to step back from things or make shifts and changes, and sometimes we don't always like that. But if we really do it, again, kind of leaning into this place of trust and knowing that you'll be well taken care of, then things really start to shift in our life. Anyways, this is a lot longer than I thought, but I hope that helps. And again, I just want to say, if you are on this beautiful journey of awakening to your true sense of self and really wanting to trust more and really wanting to trust the universe and spirit and really trusting you more and really, you know, cultivating that relationship and really strengthening that relationship with your intuition, that's amazing. And you're already there, or you wouldn't be pushed to watch this video, you wouldn't be pushed in that direction, and you're well on your way. It's just going to take some effort from your part to do the work. And it's beautiful work, and this is why I have this community on Facebook, is so if it is tiring and it can be exhausting doing our work that we need to, then you have other people to kind of connect with, and that's extremely important. So I'm really proud of all of you, and you know, we're all in this together. And yeah, I will leave it there. So next week we'll kind of do the bigger kind of, yeah, I haven't quite figured it all out, but I kind of know the direction we're going, and I think it'll play well with this video. All right, I hope you're having a beautiful Thursday, and this ends our first segment of Medium Small Talk. Take care, bye.